I am so delighted and excited to have on the podcast today Annette of Bija Vitality. And we had just such a fun chance encounter months and months ago. We're both involved in the perinatal world. And so I got to meet with her at a gathering, a collective gathering of other birth workers. And it was so fun to meet you, Chanel. And you had made all these delicious Ayurvedic, yummy foods to share. And yeah, I just loved connecting with you and so excited to dive into your work now. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I'm so appreciative of having the chance to be on with you. And it is wonderful to connect again after so many months. So thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. I'm curious, just kind of starting, I'm curious what brought you into the world of Ayurveda and also the name of your business. I don't know if wherever you want to start with either of those questions.
Yeah, for sure. So I can start with my business name. So it's Bija Vitality. And Bija is actually a Sanskrit word, if you will. Sanskrit is really, it's not a language, it's more of a vibration, but I'll just for all intents and purposes, we'll use the word. So Bija means seed, actually, if you're going to translate it. And I appreciated that a lot because what I am hoping to cultivate in my business is helping women to already see the seeds that are inside of them and cultivate them on their own. And I use Ayurveda as a means of helping them to cultivate that vitality in their systems. So I'm definitely focused specifically on preconception and pregnancy and postpartum. And I really wanted to choose a Sanskrit word because it's so timeless, if you will. And we all have all of these beautiful capacities inside of ourselves. And for me, Ayurveda is a way to help cultivate all of those capacities and our inherent intelligence. So I chose Bija Vitality as my business name. And then as far as how I came to Ayurveda, I went through a really intense shift in my life. And as I was doing that, I realized that it was time for me to kind of step out and start to create a new career path for myself. And it's funny because this has been, if you will, it's been a seed that's been within me for a long time. So after I had my daughter, Bria, I had a really intense, difficult postpartum time. And I couldn't walk. I was severely injured after having her. My entire pelvis and everything was completely wrecked. And I wasn't even able to lift my feet off of the floor, Sarah. I had to use a walker. And it was so crazy. Nobody could tell me what was happening. Nobody in the conventional systems could really explain to me what happened or what was going on. And luckily, I was able to make my way back to some form of homeostasis after many, many months of physical therapy with someone who's so local and wonderful here in town. And it took me a long time, but when I went through that experience, it was really emotional. And postpartum is also just, as you know, from working with so many women in postpartum, it's a tender time. There's a lot that can come up. And so it was a very challenging time for me. And I share this because afterwards, it just lit, after I was on the other side, if you will, of the trauma of not being able to use my body and not having it function properly. It lit such a fire under me of how do I get involved in supporting women who are in such a tender time? There's got to be a better way. There has to be a better way than being told that you need to take some sort of steroids to help with the pain or inflammation. There has to be something different. And I knew that inherently, that there was something better out there. So I went in search of doing a postpartum doula certification. And through Doulas of North America, the DONA International.
Mhm.
And
Mm.
as I was in that process, I got pregnant again,
Oh, wow.
and
Oh my gosh.
with my son Atlas. So I end up having two children. They're 26 months apart, and I wasn't able to really dive into that to completion because I was just in very much the mother time frame.
Yeah.
So, bringing this to how I came to Ayurveda, when my children were a little bit older, a few years down the line, I found myself in a shift in my life where my husband at the time and I were separating and deciding that it was time for us to go on our own separate adventures. And it was very amicable and caring. And we both are so grateful for how everything has journeyed out with the two of us. But during that period of time, I was looking to what are my passions? How do I want to extend myself? So I ended up going back and finishing up the DONA, the postpartum certification. And while I was going through this shift, was also introduced to many new people and had come to know more about Vedic culture. And through that learning about Vedic culture and hearing more about Ayurveda and doing my searches online and what's happening locally, I found a local Ayurvedic college here in Colorado.
Wow.
And they just so happened to have an amazing pregnancy and postpartum nutrition and support program. So it was just so meant to be. So as I'm going through this big shift in life and trying to figure out how I want to extend myself and step into this new season of life, I finished my DONA postpartum certification and this beautiful year-long journey with Ayurveda Sadhana, this Ayurvedic college here in Colorado, began. And that was my in really to learning about Ayurveda. And it was an amazing journey of learning about what Ayurveda is and how it can support women in pregnancy and postpartum.
Mhm.
And while I was finishing that program, I decided to just, what the heck, jump into the next step. And so now I am in my year of, I'm in, let me rephrase. So now I am in their 4-year Ayurvedic practitioner program. Actually, it's an advanced Ayurvedic practitioner program. So that is how I came to know about Ayurveda. And it has been completely life changing for me.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. That's such a beautiful journey. And it's so interesting. I think just thinking of the idea of your business as the seed. And I feel like, before we hopped on, you were talking about planting seeds and the idea that your business is focused on kind of planting seeds of like new life within people, whether that leads to a pregnancy or not, that just like bringing out this vitality and this new creative force in people is really exciting and so beautiful to be planting these seeds and to have had that experience yourself. I'm curious, you've mentioned that your work in Ayurveda would have been so helpful with your children. I'm curious what you could have done differently or what you imagine would have been different with Ayurveda and how it's helped you now. And oh, I guess kind of rewinding for anyone who doesn't know what Ayurveda is, maybe we can, if you don't mind, like explaining a little bit about that just super briefly. We've touched on it in different podcast episodes, but just for anyone who doesn't know what Ayurveda is, I think it's nice to give like a little recap.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Ayurveda means the science of life, like the knowledge and like if you think about the word Vedas, right? It's knowledge, and then Ayu is that the life knowledge.
Mhm.
So when we're thinking about what how to encompass what Ayurveda is, it's really put very simply how we can live life. It's the knowledge of how to live your life. And it comes from the Vedas, which are the most ancient texts that are available to humanity. And they're not really texts, but let's use that word, that they are passed down. It's a vibrational Sanskrit language that's been passed down from teacher to student. And and basically you have there's 4 parts to the Vedas. And within those parts of the Vedas, there are all of these beautiful practices that encompass this consciousness-based healing system of Ayurveda. So Ayurveda comes from these ancient texts of the Vedas. It's the most ancient that you can get. There's nothing else that is older than the Vedas. And so when I really sit down and say all of that, it's humbling, right?
Mhm.
That I've been able to be introduced to Ayurveda and that I get to extend myself in this way of being able to help women using that beautiful life science. And so that is a little bit about what Ayurveda is. It takes
It's
into account the whole person, the mind, the body, the spirit, the soul. You really are supported on all levels of who you are, and it marries, well, I shouldn't say marries, but it really brings forth the connection between the macro and the micro, particularly with the elements. So Ayurveda uses a lot of talking about the elements and how that is in the macro world, and us, and what that looks like in our body systems as well.
Mhm. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. So it's more than ghee and turmeric.
It's more than ghee and turmeric. And it's more than the doshas. Everybody loves to focus so much on those, and they are important, but there's so much to it. And this is why it is important when approaching Ayurveda to realize that it meets people exactly where they are and it can help anybody. I've never, in my time of studying it so far, I have not come across anything that Ayurveda in the ancient texts does not have something that it's speaking to, that it can help with. But it is wonderful to be studying under the Ayurvedic teacher that I am studying under, because comes from 7 generations of Ayurvedic doctors stemming to India. And I'm grateful to learn proper and traditional Ayurveda, because it is not just all of the popular herbs that you hear about and the doshas and all of these things. They're really beautiful pieces of understanding Ayurveda, but it's wonderful to work with somebody who has the full scope of it, right? Because we're much more than just 1 or 2 factors, and our life decisions can be made on much more than those things, if you will.
Mm.
So I'm happy to talk more about that, Sarah, or I can jump into the topic of when I had kids and all
Yeah.
of that too.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great foundation. I just wanna make sure people
Cool.
have a sense. So, yeah, I think
Totally.
that totally lays the groundwork. So thank you for sharing that, and
For
what
sure.
a beautiful teacher to be able to connect with, especially to have
Mm.
somebody with that kind of depth of knowledge. You can kind of feel it in their bones when you're with somebody who just understands the plants and bodies and just different ways of supporting and healing. Like, you can just feel it in your bones. So that's such a beautiful experience to be with.
It is. It absolutely is. It's amazing. And when I met him, so his name is Dr. Bharat Vaidya, and we call him either Vaidya, or which means Ayurvedic doctor, or Dr. V. But when I met him, it was like he saw so much about me
Mm,
in an instant. And I've experienced his sensitivity to being able to really support people in the clinics that we all do together, and in my own work with him as well. So yes, there is something very profound to be said about learning from someone who comes from a very long line, and a lineage that has been steeped in the traditional and proper Ayurvedic wisdom. I just so appreciate it.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, I love that Ayurveda can have this like ancient traditional reverence and power, and also it can be like there are little small practical things you can weave in. So like both things work, like you can use like easy and approachable techniques, and also like there's this vast knowledge underneath it all.
Totally. And Ayurveda should not be something that is intimidating. And this is what I really love to drive home when I speak to anybody about Ayurveda is although the concepts are vast and although it is timeless and it is ancient wisdom, it meets anybody exactly where they are, even my own children, right? I use very, very quick and personalized things for them, but they're not complicated. And yes, our systems have a lot going on, but there are really pointed things that can be used in Ayurveda that are so supportive. And so it's not to be looked at as being overwhelming or like it's too much, or that it's a list of do's and don'ts.
Mm.
And this is why working with somebody can be really helpful too, because there's a simplicity of they've learned all of these things and you don't have to know every single thing. Sometimes it's just as simple as here's your beautiful protocol, have these teas, eat these specific things for this period of time, and then it changes as the body adapts.
Mm.
And that's something that I use with the women that I work with too, is when you're meeting somebody for the first time and they're wanting to incorporate Ayurveda, the protocol that you start off with is not the protocol that you end up with after time, right? Because it shifts and changes, as I'm sure you know, with
Mhm.
your own work and with herbalism, that the herbs do their magic and then the body responds. And then
Yeah.
you're able to see that response and then make adjustments as time goes on. So you're right. Ayurveda has tons of beautiful practices. It doesn't have to be complicated, and it's not complicated, but it is helpful to have some help if you're working on something really specific like preconception or your fertility, or if you have an autoimmune or, something else that can be a little more deep seated. Sometimes it can be helpful to
Yeah,
work with somebody.
that makes sense. I'm curious, like, how often you like to meet with people, because I feel like, ideally maybe every week or every 2 weeks, but I'm curious, like, what that frequency often looks like for you.
For me, I mean, it varies, I think, from practitioner to practitioner. So I'll just say I am an Ayurvedic preconception coach, and I also am a certified Ayurvedic nutrition and support doula for pregnancy and postpartum timeframe, and an advanced Ayurvedic practitioner in training. So really, it just depends on the type of client that I'm choosing to work with. So many practitioners will meet with their clients once every 15 days, and they'll do a 15-day protocol, and they will then meet again after 15 days and check in. But there's a few different ways that you can work with me. The first one with the preconception is I have a 3-month coaching container, and this is for women who are wanting to get pregnant soon, and they're hoping to conceive soon within like the next few months or the next year, but they're wanting to prepare first. In that particular container, I meet with women for 3 months, and we meet every single week on our video calls and are able to do our check ins and see what's happening every single week. And we do 60-minute video calls. And then throughout the week, I offer Voxer support, which is this amazing app that it's a walkie talkie style app. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but you can talk back and forth in real time about what's happening, and say something's happening that's unexpected, with your menses, or you are experiencing different physical symptoms that are happening. Then you can touch base with me through Voxer in that way and have that high touch support until our next meeting. So that's the way that I work. Yeah, it's a super juicy offer, because when you don't want to mess around when you're trying to adjust with your menstrual cycle And when you're wanting to really amplify your fertility, there's so many beautiful practices that you can do to do that. And so I have crafted this offer so that I have really consistent weekly check-ins with these women, and then we can communicate back and forth throughout the week, through business hours throughout the week in between our video sessions. So that's for the preconception. That also transfers into pregnancy as well. I do offer pregnancy packages as well, where you can touch base that often as well. And then postpartum, as you know, is a whole different animal.
Mhm. Yeah.
So they say like for 42 days postpartum, if you can take care of the woman for those 42 days, then you're setting her up for the next 42 years, because it is such a potent and important time for the woman, and the mother, and the new mother, to be nourished. So that 6-week time frame also is really high touch as well. So for me, I like to be really dialed in, and I don't take on a ton of clients at a time, for that reason, so that I can really enter into that space and really hold them through that time frame, whether it is preconception, pregnancy, or postpartum. I can really hold them during that time frame, and a lot can happen during those time frames in a week, right?
Mhm.
A lot can happen, so I like to be pretty consistent in my connections with them.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, that's such a juicy offering. What a gorgeous way to work with people, and just I imagine they feel so nourished and supported, and just to have that kind of a support and camaraderie and somebody who can help them through that time. I mean, it can be such a journey of just different experiences emotionally and physically that can be very baffling and challenging.
No doubt. There are a lot of things, especially in preconception time, because
Mm,
I can't tell you how many women, especially even in the clinics in my school, where we have people coming in who are struggling with their menstrual cycle. And
mm,
I don't know if that's something that you encounter as well, just in your work in herbalism, but there are so many women who are struggling to regulate their menstrual cycle. There's
mm,
something funky going on. It's either too short, or it's too long, or we have clotting happening, or missed cycles completely. And so it is really important to take the time to figure out what's going on and hold them in that space to get everything regulated. And with Ayurveda, there's so many beautiful practices that are supportive of that. But I know in other podcasts you've had people who are in Ayurveda talk about this, but the Agni,
mm,
the fire that's represented, Agni is that fire that's in our systems, our digestive fire. And oftentimes with Ayurveda, that is the first thing that a practitioner will go to try to dial in, is if you have low Agni, usually is the case. And when you don't have proper digestion happening, it's going to affect whether or not you're absorbing and assimilating all of the nutrition and the herbs that you're taking. So while it's great, all of these amazing herbs that are out there and these beautiful transformational plants that are there, if your channels are not clear, then you're just tossing on all of this food and all of these herbs into a system that doesn't have the capacity to burn all of that and assimilate it. And you're not absorbing all the nutrition that you need, which is vital for a healthy ovum and a healthy reproductive system. So I love to focus and start off with what's going on with your digestion. What does elimination look like for you? Like, what are we having gas? Are we having bloating? These are all questions that come into play when you're even talking about fertility, especially when you're talking about fertility, because digestion is really, really key for a healthy ovum. So I think that it's important to look at the whole system, not just what do your periods look like,
mm,
right? In Ayurveda, there's 7 tissues, there's 7 dhatus, and the reproductive tissues are the most subtle, right? So we start
mm,
off with the blood and the plasma, the
Mhm.
rasa and the rakta, and then we go down into the seven tissues, and the reproductive system is the most subtle. It's the last one for
Mhm.
when for human beings. So this is why we start with what seems like, what is what I'm eating have anything to do with my reproductive system? It has everything. And your body's ability to digest and absorb and assimilate has everything to do with it. So there's so many beautiful ways to help support them in that preconception time frame, for sure.
Yeah, so beautiful. I know I heard a study recently that there was women going through IVF and just a couple different strategies to improve their gut microbiome, like, part of the study some people were in the study and they did this gut protocol, and then others weren't, and they showed that it improved fertility from, like, I think it was, like, 23% chance of implantation up to 77% just from, like, 1 month of, like, improving gut microbiome. So it's like your gut has a lot to a lot to tell you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really it's the doorway into us receiving all that we need to have us living in true health and vitality.
Mm.
So, yeah, it's super, super important for sure. Agni, Agni, Agni. That is the foundation in Ayurveda. It's our life force, really. The prana, it's what helps everything to flow properly in our system. So, I mean, and that's one part of it. The
Mhm.
body vitality is one piece of what it means to prepare for pregnancy
Mhm.
consciously. So in my preconception coaching, we do a three-leafed focus to help women prepare for a conscious conception and pregnancy. And the first one is cultivating a fertile mind.
Mm.
So,
Wow.
yes.
Cool.
So it's mind, cultivating a fertile mind, cultivating body vitality, and then it is creating a sacred, non toxic home environment. So those are the three leaves of focus in my coaching container to help women prepare for a conscious conception and pregnancy. Because where I say this time and again to everybody, where the mind goes, the body follows, right?
Mhm.
So, whatever we have happening in our mind is what's informing everything else that's happening in the body, because the body is like, I've been told many times, and it's been repeated to me many times, the body is slow thought.
Mm.
And
Oh, I like
so, yes. So when we think about, okay, what are the limiting beliefs that we have around ourselves and our capacity to be someone that can create in our experience and that can create life in our body? What limiting beliefs do we have around that? What patterned thinking are we carrying from childhood? What was our relationship with our parents like? And how has that informed the way we view ourselves and we view our own capacity to love, to create, and to be? Perhaps we have questions about whether or not we do have what it takes to be a loving and caring parent, because maybe that wasn't our experience
Mhm.
growing up, right? Maybe we didn't experience consistency. So, what does it look like for us to take a step back, take a breath, and think about how we view ourselves and what ways we view ourselves as limited? And in the cultivating a fertile mind piece of my coaching, we focus so much on just noticing those things. First of all, noticing how we view ourselves, noticing where we have habitual ways of thinking and how that affects the way we live. And then it's rewiring all of that through mantra, if it resonates with you, through word spells, like creating these beautiful lists of affirming things that you can say to yourself. And something my business coach talks to me a lot about is
Mhm.
getting into the feeling.
Mm,
of what that feels like to be true in yourself. Because if you say something, that's one thing. If you say something affirming, like, I can trust my capacity to create, that's fine to say it. But when you really sit and you sink into that feeling, that is where the magic happens. When you're
mm,
sinking into the feeling of, yes, I can create this. So, the a lot of these cultivating a fertile mind is getting into the feeling of what does it feel like to feel free from a lot of those patterned thinking. What does it feel like to have been disciplined to do all of these beautiful Ayurvedic body practices and then to feel sensual and juicy and full of vibrancy and feel rejuvenated, so that when you step into that moment of being ready to conceive, then you like, what do you feel like? What does your mind feel like? What does your body feel like? And getting into the feeling of that ahead of time and cultivating that fertility in the mind first, right?
mm.
So that you feel prepared to step into something intentional. So that's that first piece. And then the second piece, of course, is all of these amazing Ayurvedic practices that are focused on what you're eating and what herbs to take, and the dinacharya, which is the daily routines and beautiful practices and the rhythm of your day and evenings. And then the sacred non-toxic home environment is also a big piece of creating a conscious space that's welcoming and it's receptive. There's so many toxic things that we have to field now, just being a human being on this planet. We've got a lot of chemicals in food and in cleaning products and beauty products and in furniture. And I mean, you can talk about this forever, but it's really meeting you where you are in your lifestyle and figuring out, okay, how can we reduce the toxic load? What are we cooking with? What are we stirring with here? Like, what am I putting on my body for my cosmetics and all of these things, and finding ways that can reduce that toxic load, which will help amplify fertility and also create a sacred home environment that's going to be receptive, ready to be receiving this new experience of being pregnant and then having that baby come into your home.
That's so beautiful. I've never heard that piece of it. The idea, like sometimes people will talk about non-toxic home, but I've never heard it embedded in Ayurvedic practices or in fertility and like really focusing on that in the conception stage, but it makes so much sense. It's like you're creating this nest for someone and, to create this fertile mind, this fertile body, and this fertile nest and space for yourself to feel safe bringing and excited to bring someone, a new little being into your world. I think that's such a
Yeah.
beautiful way to consider what we're working with, like what cleaning products we're working with, what clothing we're wearing, like, and just being more mindful in what we're consuming and weaving into our lives. That's such a beautiful, I love that, the trifold of like
Mhm.
your those 3 leaves.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so passionate to be extending myself in these ways with women, because really it is such a boon that you're giving yourself
Mm,
and that you're giving your partner and that you're giving your baby to imagine stepping into that time frame of life feeling like, yeah, I let go of a lot of old thinking habits and I found new ways to manage the stress that's coming up in my life. And I have all of these wonderful mindset shifts that I've done and practices that can bring me back home. And I have body practices that are steeped in ancient wisdom that bring me back home. And my home is sacred to me, right?
mhm,
And what a state of receptivity to be in.
mm,
It's such a foundation. And I would love to say and talk just a little bit about the the importance of that moment of conception. So
Mhm.
Ayurveda does talk about the actual moment of conception. And in Ayurveda, we are born with what's called the prakriti or prakruti, and that is your constitution that you're born with. And it is comprised of the doshas, the vata, the pitta, the kapha. And when you're born, you have one or two, sometimes three doshas that are predominant. And at that moment of conception, those are informed. And of course, yes, we have genetics. And of course, yes, we have the mother's experience in pregnancy, which is why I also offer support in pregnancy time because it's so vital. And of course, yes, there is the actual birth experience. And all of those things play a part in the baby's constitution. But the moment of conception is super important, like the moment that egg and sperm come together. And the state of the mother and the state of the father at that actual moment are what informs that baby's constitution for life. Because what you're born with, that's it. Like there is no changing, oh, I'm in my 20s now. This is what my constitution is. No. You might have things that get vitiated or change, and there's like the kapha period of life, which is childhood, the pitta period of life, which is your middle age of life, and the vata period of life, which is older age. But what your personal prakriti is stays constant. And so it's so important to imagine yourself stepping into that actual moment and being like, yes, my state of mind is amazing right now. I have freed myself. I'm living in so much spaciousness. My partner also, because let's not forget about the fathers. Those are their state of being is also so important. We've done this work together, and we are setting ourselves up with such a boon and such a foundation for ourselves and for for the baby's health as well. It's just so profound.
Mhm.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, so beautiful. And, just thinking of the way that we carry stories, like our ancestors' stories within our body, within our bones. Like, I think any healing that you can do prenatally before conception is just so profound and can really help the next generation to step forward in a more clean and supported manner as well.
Totally. And it's so interesting to think about that, yes, like what comes forward in our ancestry and our lineage and from our lineages, like that these are real things, right?
Mhm.
And let me tell you, once you have your baby, it all kind of really comes forward, if I'm going to be really honest. Like
Mhm.
things just crop up. The emotions crop up, the triggers crop up, all of these things crop up, and they are really right in front of your face. And so, having these practices to help bring you back home and having done some of the work ahead of time is such a gift. I've also talked about this a lot is if you want to change the world, one of the ways to do that is by starting with the woman. And
Mhm.
because I am so passionate about the women's vitality, I focus on talking about that. But of course, men are important too, and this work for men is really important as well. But imagine having a woman who has all of these beautiful practices, and then is bringing forth this child, and then that child really gets to witness. Well, they first experienced it in their body by being inside of her, and then gets to witness their mother doing all of these things in her life, and she's then teaching that to the child, right?
Mhm.
So you're really changing the world and changing the my Ayurvedic teacher talks about it as suprajata, which is that next health, that next generation. And so you start with the woman and all and empowering, having her empower her own self by cultivating her own vitality in herself and her mind and in her body and everything. And that's going to just inherently and naturally translate to the child, who then learns that, and then they get to grow up doing all of these Ayurvedic practices. and knowing how to bring themselves back home too. It's just wonderful. I love it.
So beautiful. I'm curious, just a couple of the Ayurvedic practices or things. I also love hearing about like dinacharya, like the morning and the evening routines of Ayurveda. I'm curious if there's just like a couple of your favorite practices that listeners could play around with or experience.
For sure. There are so many, and it does depend on where you are at in your life and what's happening in your system. But I'll share some general ones that I love and I find to be applicable for pretty much everybody. And the first is to get up before the sun, get up before that sun is coming into view. If you can do that like 90 minutes before dawn, that is great, because the veil, if you will, is thin, and we are more receptive, if you will, to being able to commune with ourselves. And I really, really encourage people to get up early in the morning. Also, seeing the early morning sun rays, all of that helps with the circadian rhythms and helps your sleep. So I really encourage that. I also always tell people to then make sure that you're popping some water on your stove, get that going and go. Tongue scrape and get all of the toxins that accumulate on the tongue. It's called ama. You tongue scrape that off with, I always recommend copper, but stainless steel is fine too, a tongue scraper. And then to have 2 big glasses of room temperature or warm water from your stove to help to wake up the acidity in the body, to rehydrate your cells, get things moving. It stimulates peristalsis, and then to eliminate in the morning, ideally first thing. So those 3 things are super wonderful practices to get into the habit of. Of course, there's so much more to say. Oil pulling with sesame oil is wonderful for 15 minutes when you're getting your breakfast going, but I do really recommend getting up and sitting in stillness and having some stillness with yourself before the sun rises. And doing some of those other body care practices for sure. Room temperature water, warm water, no ice water. I tell everybody, stay away from the super cold.
Mhm.
But if your channels are clear enough, I also love to recommend doing the Abhyanga, which is the warm oil application on the body. You warm up sesame oil. Usually it's sesame oil. Sometimes if you're in a warmer area, coconut oil is better because it's cooling a little more. The properties are more cooling. And sesame is quite hot in nature. But you're doing a lymphatic warm oil application over your whole entire body, and that nourishes all 7 dhatus, all of those tissues down to the reproductive system as well. Sometimes though, I recommend like touching base with a practitioner first, because it is heavy in nature, and if you have some vitiation of pitta, which is the fire element, or maybe your channels aren't completely cleared yet, then that can kind of stop things up a little bit or to be too hot. But generally speaking, Abhyanga is a beautiful practice that is recommended in the ancient texts every single day, which is unless you are bleeding. For a woman. So definitely do not do that if you are bleeding. We want to wait until you're done bleeding. And it's also contraindicated in pregnancy as well, because it's a little too hot in nature. But those are some of my favorites.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, thank you, Chanel. I love all of those recommendations. And I
Yeah.
know sometimes I hear with Abhyanga, it's best to take a shower after. Is that something that you encourage too?
Definitely. So ideally, if you can carve enough time in your morning to do this, you're doing the warm oil application, and then you're letting it soak in for 20 minutes if you can. If not, then definitely going into doing it while you're in a steamy shower room or in the shower, and like sitting for 10 to 20 minutes in the shower or in a sauna or or something like that, and just kind of letting it steam. I don't know if I actually would recommend the sauna because it's not necessarily recommended to have so much heat in the head, but being in something where you're warm, because what ends up happening is it then helps to permeate even deeper into the tissues. So my Ayurvedic doctor recommends to take a hot. Not everybody's super into the bath or wants to take the time to do that, but your ideal setup is you're doing the abhyanga, you're letting it sit for 20 minutes, and then you're taking a hot bath and then towel drying off afterwards. But just do your best, you know. Sometimes we don't always have that time, and sometimes even just putting a little oil on before a shower or after, that's also great too. Again,
Okay.
it's not so much about the do's and don'ts as per se as it is just taking these steps to help us with our self-care, right?
I love that. Yeah, thank you for that kind of freedom and space and encouragement to just savor your body and do nice things for yourself, I think. Whatever. Because especially in pregnancy and postpartum, it gets so can be such a busy time. Like, I think it's hard to and there are so many, like, rules that people or things that people feel like they are supposed to do or not supposed to do, and so just giving, like, some freedom can
Yeah.
feel really liberating.
You just do the best you can,
Yeah,
right? You
yeah.
just do the best you can. And postpartum Abhyanga is essential. And in
Mhm,
fact, like I make the medicated oils for the postpartum women, particularly where they are chock full of all of these beautiful oils that are then permeated in. But in the Ayurvedic texts, yeah, it's to do Abhyanga. You're supposed to have someone do Abhyanga for you every day in postpartum.
mm.
Like how amazing.
Oh my god, that
How
would be
amazing.
I want our culture to embrace that. That would be an amazing society.
Totally. And, you know, if you, I mean, I offer the Abhyangas here locally. And if, yes, for sure. I mean, my, my offerings, if someone is local, like that could be a really good fit for somebody. But if anybody, whoever's listening, like definitely look up Ayurvedic practitioners or a place to do the Abhyangas or have them come to your home to do them if you're in postpartum, because it is so important to help ground the postpartum mother and to help bring that vata down. And in preconception too, it's incredibly helpful for bringing down vata and helping to ground and support your fertility for sure. It's one of my favorite practices. That's so yummy.
Yeah. Yeah, I do Abhyanga every day. It's just like I have to, but I'm like, I don't know how people live without this or how I lived without it.
Seriously. Yeah, it's incredible.
It's
It's
so good.
incredible.
Well, Chanel, I have just a couple little bonus questions if you have another minute left. Is that okay?
Yes, I'm here for it.
Okay, I'm curious, something that you feel grateful for.
I think more and more I feel grateful for me coming to this place where I'm accepting on a deeper level that I'm on time.
Mm. Oof, that gives me chills. That's really
Mm.
cool.
I think a lot of my life I have lived feeling like I was behind
Mhm,
or that I needed to catch up and struggled feeling grounded in like where I was. Like I always had something to do and if I did this then X, Y, or Z would be okay, or then everything would fall into place. And I realized more and more that that comes from like a place of lack and also feeling that if I do anything, then I'll be safe, right?
mhm,
But more and more, I'm finding myself grateful for the teachings that I've received from these people that just came into my experience and are in my experience, my business coach being one of them too, of helping me to see that I'm on time
mm, mm.
for my life and everything happens in divine timing and to trust myself. So it's really just gratitude for allowing myself to begin to really believe that and sink into that. So I feel grateful for the contemplation and the musings around that right now.
Beautiful. And the divine timing, the planting of all the seeds, and they're growing as they're meant to grow.
For sure. Absolutely. As they do. And
Mm,
everything sprouts when it's supposed to sprout and blossoms when it's supposed to blossom. And
mhm,
so I'm grateful for being able to come back to that,
mm.
because life can be intense. It can feel intense at times. And if we can come back to something that is grounding and helps us to feel safe and, yeah, to feel safe and to feel like we can trust ourselves, you know, I always encourage it. So,
Agreed. I'm curious, something you feel really excited about in the year ahead.
oh my gosh. I feel just excited to be extending myself in
Mm,
this way. Really, truly.
mm,
My entire life has shifted and changed
yeah,
in at a very rapid pace. And just this new trail that is blazing ahead of me, if you will,
I
is
feel
just,
it. Yeah, it's
yeah.
like radiant. I'm like, whoa, I love what you're offering. And yeah, the future is bright.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I appreciate it. And I am excited. I'm excited to be extending myself in this way. I'm excited about my business. I'm excited about learning Ayurveda. I'm excited for the friendships and the relationships in my life that are becoming ever more supportive of me as I change the way that I view myself. Then everything else is being mirrored back to me in that way of just support and love. And I'm so grateful and excited about that too. So I guess those two questions are kind of married together, of just feeling grateful for being able to feel on time and excited to be on time and to experience myself this way, and to sit back and watch it all unfold and to feel supported in all of it. It just feels great. Feels
It's
really
so
great.
beautiful. I love that. Lastly, any favorite resources? Either other people, like podcasts, books, or resources that you have available. I love your Instagram, by the way, but yeah,
Thank
just
you.
favorite resources, I guess you want to mention.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see here. So my school is a huge resource to me, Ayurveda Sadhana, which if you go on my Instagram at Bija Vitality, you'll see me reference them all of the time. But they have a great blog, and they are a wonderful resource for Ayurveda. It's proper and traditional, and I really appreciate that about them. I also, on my Instagram, reference Kirtana Prasad a lot. And it is a beautiful community of people that come together, and there's wonderful teachings that I really appreciate, and I learn a lot from them as well. So, a lot of the teachings have to do with just taking full responsibility for your life and learning what it is to be yourself, which is loving yourself. And there is a real deep wisdom that comes forth, that it's just the real. It's the real. And I often will go back and listen to the talks that they post on their Instagram. And let me think if I have one more. Well, for women business owners, I definitely recommend Weave Your Bliss as well. My business coach, Paula Crossfield, is amazing, and she's just chock full of wonderful, amazing tips. She marries her expertise in Vedic astrology
Mm,
and uses that to help owners to use Vedic astrology and what's going on in their charts to inform them of when it's best time to take action or to lay low. So, yeah, those three have been really wonderful for me as I have been going on in my personal and professional journey.
amazing. I was going to ask because you mentioned her a couple times, and I was like, who is this business
Yeah,
coach?
her name is Paula Crossfield, and I so appreciate her. She's incredible and has really been an integral part of my life shifting and changing as well. So, yeah, We can link all of this if you'd like to, for sure.
Yeah, that would be great. Oh my gosh, well, Chanel, it has been such a treat to get to talk to you. How can people support your business and support you and connect with you further?
Yeah, thank you so much. The best way to find all of my information is on my website, bijavitality.com. And also, I am on Facebook, Bija Vitality, and at Bija Vitality on Instagram. But my offerings, there's a few ways to work with me. The first one is in my one-on-one preconception preparing for pregnancy coaching, where I hold women in a 3-month container through cultivating a fertile mind and a body vitality and sacred home environment for 3 months in preparation for pregnancy. I also offer one-on-one, one-time 60-minute Amplify Your Fertility sessions. And those sessions are great for women who are ready now. They feel like they want to get pregnant fairly soon, or they just want some really potent things that they can implement right now. So I do an intake questionnaire with them, and they walk away from a 60-minute video call with me with 3 to 5 really individualized and potent action steps that they can take right now to step into their most fertile and sensual and rejuvenated self to amplify their fertility. And I also offer pregnancy support and postpartum support that can be at a distance as well. And if someone is local in the Boulder County area or the surrounding areas, then that's also something that can be added on as well, with potentially in-person visits where I do Ayurvedic cooking and the Abhyanga applications and all of the body therapies as well. But everything is on my website, and kind of it all circles into the social media and everything. And that's the best way to get in touch. I definitely offer free 20-minute connection calls with people who want to hear more about what I offer or just have a chance to connect with me ahead of time. We just grab a tea and hop on a call for 20 minutes. And that's such a great way to just like have a face-to-face over video chat and get to know each other a little bit more. And then I can answer any questions that people might have.
Oh, beautiful. I love all your offerings. You have a juicy package of ways that you can help people and support them.
I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to extend myself, and I'm grateful to everybody that I am learning from and have learned from. It's really an honor. And my goal is to help 1,000 women. I'm really going to talent market for real. My goal is to help 1,000 women cultivate their own vitality using the ancient wisdom of Ayurveda, especially in the preconception and pregnancy and postpartum time. So
Mm.
thank you so much for having me. I'm
Yes.
so grateful for the time.
Oh, me too. I just am so warmed and glad that I got to spend this time with you and reconnect. And I feel that in my bones. Like when you said 1,000 women, I was like, oh, chills. Like I definitely see you helping that many women multifold.
Thank you so
Many times
much.
over.
And may it be so. May
Yes,
it be
and
so.
maybe so. Yes, definitely. Oh, thank you, Chanel.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.